Okay, so I'm going to show you how this complex sound was made. And I'm going to start with Thor because it's the first thing in the list and it's the first thing that I started with when I started out to create this patch. Now, before I do that, and before I show you the oscillators and filter setup that I used in Thor, I'm going to break the sound into the elements that it contains. And really, there's three different elements. So first of all, we've got Thor. Now, if we look towards the bottom of the patch in the rack, we've got a mixer. Now, I've put all three elements through their own channels in this submixer. I'll show you the routing of that as we get towards the end of the sound, but they're not actually in the order I created them. Number 2 is Thor. And that's actually the sound we're going to be looking at first. Then we've got a maelstrom, creating some sort of high frequency noise. Quite a cool sound. And then finally, we've got some, what I like to call found sound. Which is actually, let me just switch these sounds off. And that found sound is actually a field recording that's been put into an NNXT and synthesized. And that's what we'll be looking at last. So let's break this down and let's look at the Thor patch first. Okay, so we've got 3 oscillators. And when we first looked at Thor, I showed you how to mix the oscillators and I showed you Thor's semi-modular approach to sound design and sound creation. Now, we've got an FM oscillator, a noise oscillator, and a phase modulation oscillator. Now, it's really important when you're creating synth patches to complement your sounds or synth patches to create the actual sound to mess these oscillator mixes up. And don't just stick to a standard analog oscillator. I mean, it's very tempting to just stick to a saw wave. But the more complex you get and the more adventurous you get, the more interesting the sound's going to be. So if we take a look at just one oscillator, for instance. Now that's at FM, and then I added some noise. And that's white noise. And then I fed a phase modulation oscillator through a comb filter. Now you can see that the third oscillator is being fed through this second filter here. And you do that by using these little LEDs here. You can see number 3 is going through the comb filter. And then the comb filter is being modulated by LFO2. You can hear that movement. And the first filter is being modulated by LFO1. And then I just dialed in some nice slow filter envelopes and amp envelopes and a little bit of stereo delay. The whole thing was then fed through the echo, and these are multi-panning echoes, so quite a complex delay patch. And it's just one of the delay patches from the Reason sound bank. In fact, it's one of the default ones, so nice and easy to find. You can hear it dry. Let's turn the delay off in the Thor as well. And you can really hear that comb filter. And you can hear that mixture of oscillators really help to complement each other and make a crazy soundscape. And that's how you make these complex sounding patches with only a small amount of work. So if I was you, I'd experiment with all kinds of different combinations in this oscillator section and obviously get into some modulation as well. So that's our first section of the sound. Next up, I want to show you some granular synthesis. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I want to show you the maelstrom in action, and that'll be complementing our sound again and almost acting like an extra oscillator.